He came riding up just past noon, the sun high and mean above the ridgeline, its heat hammering down on the roof shingles of the old trading post like it was trying to burn history off the boards. Dust curled around the hooves of his mare and clung to the hem of his coat, already cracked with sweat and age. His name was Eli Cutter. 42, weathered down to tendon and leather, with a jaw like a broken shovel and eyes pale as a coyote's belly. He didn't come into town often, but when he did, it was never for talk. The shop sat on the edge of Calico Ridge, halfway between nothing and hell, and hadn't had a proper coat of paint in 20 years. Its windows squinted like tired eyes, and behind them, Eli figured, was the shotgun he meant to buy. He'd been needing one since the last gave out on him, barrel blown from bad shell, tore up the henhouse door in the process. No one had been around to fix it. He didn't trust catalog orders. He trusted his boots and his horse and the way the mountain wind told him if someone was lying. He stepped inside and let the screen door slap shut behind him. The air smelled like rust and old pine oil, with a backdraft of tobacco rot. Shelves leaned under the weight of coiled rope, faded lanterns, dry pans, and chipped enamel pots. The shopkeeper was nowhere to be seen, but that didn't strike Eli strange. Out in places like this, folk moved slow, took their time even with blood in their teeth. He cleared his throat. Nothing, no answer from the back. Eli crossed to the counter, where a bell sat beside a ledger no one had written in for weeks. Dust spoke truer than ink in towns like Calico Ridge. The bell rang sharp and hollow when he tapped it, then died quick in the silence. Still no one came. He waited a beat longer, then rounded the counter and made for the gear room door in back. The place he remembered old Charlie Poston keeping the firearms, locked up behind a strip of canvas curtain and a door that always stuck halfway through its swing. The door wasn't locked, it was half open. Eli pushed it with one finger. The smell hit him before the scene did, blood, fresh but drying, thick and iron-sweet. His boots scraped as he stepped inside. There was a woman tied up behind the gear room door, wrists bound in raw hide, mouth gagged with a rag soaked half through in blood. One eye swollen shut, lips split wide and hanging. Her dress was torn up one side like someone had been trying to get it off fast, or mean, or both. She was breathing, shallow but steady, eyes barely open under lashes caked with grit. Eli didn't speak. Just stared for a long moment, the dust still swirling around him from the door's swing. Then he crouched. His hand reached down slow like he was calming a colt. Her head jerked when he touched her. Flinched so hard she banged her shoulder against the crate beside her. "Don't," he said. "Ain't gonna hurt you." Her good eye found his. There was no trust in it. Only the kind of silent recognition a body has when it knows pain too well to hope. He pulled the rag from her mouth. She spat blood and coughed until her lungs rasped dry. "You alone?" he asked. She nodded once, then shook her head. "You saw who did it." Her lips parted. A sound came out, half word, half rattle. He leaned closer. "Still here," she whispered. Eli stood fast. His hand went to the knife at his belt before he remembered the reason he'd come in the first place, a new shotgun. The only one left on the rack sat crooked, walnut stock and steel barrel, dull but solid. He took it down, cracked it open, saw it was loaded. 2 shells, both fresh. Behind the rack hung a bandolier half full. He looped it over his shoulder. Footsteps creaked on the boards above, not from the front, from upstairs. Eli looked down at the woman again. She mouthed the same words, "Still here." He crossed the room in silence and slipped into the shadows along the stairwell wall. Whoever was up there was moving slow, unhurried, as if they didn't know Eli Cutter had just stepped into the story. The next sound he heard was laughter. A man's voice, light, easy, like a man telling jokes to himself, then boots coming down the stairs. Eli raised the shotgun. The man rounded the bottom step, saw him, and froze. They looked at each other like 2 dogs sniffing out the bite. The stranger was young, early 20s, with hair curled in dirty ringlets and a face too clean for these hills. His shirt was unbuttoned and his boots still had city shine under the dust. But there was a knife on his belt, dark with something that wasn't rust. "You postin'?" Eli asked. The man grinned. "Nope." He lunged. Eli fired. The sound tore the silence in half. The shot hit the stranger full in the chest, flung him back against the stair rail so hard it cracked. He dropped in a heap and didn't move again. Smoke curled up from the gun's muzzle. Eli didn't watch the body long. He stepped past and found the woman again. "I'm getting you out of here," he said. She didn't answer, just looked past him to the dead man. Her lips trembled once, then stilled. "Can you walk?" Slowly, she nodded. Eli cut her bonds and wrapped his coat around her shoulders. He moved with care, the kind a man reserves for horses with broken legs or boys with busted pride. He helped her to her feet. She swayed but stayed upright. Her mouth opened once more. "There were two," she said. Eli's grip on the shotgun tightened. "Where's the other?" he asked. Her voice cracked. "Said he was going to bury the old man." Eli turned toward the back door and the hills beyond it. "Then we don't have much time." They left the shop through the back, slipping into the dry heat that clung to the scrubland like a fever. A narrow trail wound down from the post to the gulch, where the cottonwoods grew thick around a stream bed gone dry. Eli led, the woman behind him barefoot, one arm across her ribs as if holding herself in. He offered to carry her. She refused. They didn't speak. Not until they reached the edge of the dry creek, where a shovel lay thrust into the earth like a flag on a battlefield. Nearby, something half-covered by fresh dirt gave off the unmistakable scent of rot beginning. Eli knelt beside the disturbed soil and peeled it back with his hands. The face beneath was pale and slack, lips pulled back to show broken teeth. Charlie Poston, his neck was black with bruises, tongue swollen and shoved out sideways. Eli stood again. The woman didn't flinch at the sight, just looked, like she was taking inventory of what was owed. "You know who they were?" Eli asked. She didn't answer. He turned to her. "You got a name?" She studied him for a moment like she was deciding whether he deserved it. Then she nodded, just once. "Naomi." "You know who they were," he said again. "One of them came in 2 days ago, said he was headed north, asked for water. Other one came after, taller, meaner, called the first one brother, but didn't look nothing alike. Poston let them in." Naomi shook her head. He didn't get the chance. They were already behind him before he opened the door. Her jaw twitched, a flash of something behind her eyes, not fear, not any more. Eli looked at the shallow grave again. "We'll cover him proper later," he said. Naomi said nothing. They didn't speak again until they reached Eli's horse. The mare snorted at the scent of blood on Naomi, but didn't spook. Naomi touched its neck with one shaking hand, then turned to Eli. "You're not law," she said. "No." "Then why help me?" He adjusted the bandolier across his chest. The shotgun was still warm in his grip. "Because I came to buy a gun and found you instead." That was all he said. He helped her onto the horse and took the reins. They moved west, away from town, toward the edge of the canyon where Eli kept his own place, some 15 miles out and hidden from the road by a ridge of black rock. No one passed by unless they meant to. That was how he liked it. The sun had dipped low by the time they reached it. A squat cabin, built from old logs, with a lean-to stable and a spring-fed trough beside it. He helped Naomi down and led her inside. The interior smelled of wood smoke and weathered hide. She sat in silence while he boiled water and tore clean strips from a flannel shirt. He cleaned her wounds without asking what caused them. She didn't offer. By the time the stars came, she was asleep on the cot. Eli sat in the corner sharpening a skinning knife, the rhythm slow and steady. The man he'd shot hadn't moved from Eli's thoughts. Neither had the second one. He waited until dawn to ride back. Naomi woke as he cinched the saddle. "You going after him?" He nodded. "I want to come." "No." She stood, legs trembling but eyes set. "I'm not asking." "You're not ready. You think I care." He studied her for a long breath. The cut above her eye was healing, but the look in her face said nothing would. "I can't protect you," he said. She met his gaze. "I don't want your protection, I want the kill." He didn't argue again. Just brought out the old revolver from under the floorboards. A six-shot Remington, scuffed but true. He placed it in her palm. She weighed it like it meant something sacred. It did. They rode east, toward where the trail of the second man would lead, into the broken country past Widow's Spine, where the land turned jagged and the wind whispered of things left unburied. Eli had tracked men through worse, but never with someone like her beside him. By the second day, they found sign, boot tracks headed north, staggered like the man had been moving fast, drag marks in the dirt, and blood, not much, but fresh. That night they camped under a bluff. Naomi sat near the fire, fingers tracing the revolver's grip. "What'd he say to you?" Eli asked. She didn't look up. "Nothing. No threats. No words, just did what he wanted." Eli nodded, let the fire crackle. Naomi spoke again after a long silence. "When I screamed, the first one laughed, the one you killed. He said no one'd come, that the world forgot about women like me." Eli's jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. Naomi's eyes lifted to his. "You prove him wrong, or you just passing through." He met her stare across the fire. The flames licked her face in orange light, making her look carved from something harder than flesh. "I reckon I'll stay long enough to see him dead." She gave a slow, single nod, then leaned back against the stone and shut her eyes. Eli didn't sleep that night. He kept watch, the shotgun across his lap, while the wind moved around them like a warning. In the morning, they found a burned-out wagon 4 miles north, bones scattered where buzzards had already feasted. A trail of hoofprints led from it, but only one set. The second man was riding now, running. Naomi stepped beside the broken wagon, looked down at the scorched remains. Was this his doing? Eli looked close. No, too old. This was weeks back. She bent down and picked something from the ash. A ring, half melted. She didn't say a word. Just held it a moment, then tucked it into her dress. They kept moving. By noon, the land began to change. Rock turned redder, sharper. The trail narrowed. Eli pointed to a rise ahead. "We'll see him soon." "You still ready?" Naomi slid the revolver into the waistband of her dress. "I was ready the minute he opened that door." They reached the ridge and dismounted, moved on foot now, quiet, careful. Up ahead, a lean figure crouched by a creek, washing his face. He wore a coat Eli recognized from the gear room, the second man. Naomi stepped forward. Eli reached to stop her. She shook her head. "Mine." He didn't argue. She stepped down the slope, slow as a whisper. The man turned at the last second, eyes wide. Then the gun was in her hand, and the sound of it cracked the canyon open. The first shot missed. The second tore through his thigh. He screamed and twisted, slipping in the creek's mud, scrambling backward on elbows slick with blood and water. Naomi kept walking. Her face didn't change. The revolver in her hand stayed steady. She stepped into the water like it wasn't even there. Eli stood above them on the ridge, shotgun low but ready, eyes hard. The man, this second brother, this butcher, gasped and dragged himself halfway behind a rock. His hands clawed at the dirt like he could bury himself inside it. Naomi stopped a yard from him. "You remember me?" she asked. His eyes found hers, wild and wet. He nodded. "Then say it," she whispered. He opened his mouth. No words came. She shot him again, this time through the hand that reached up in plea. He screamed, curling around the ruined fingers, blood washing downstream in slow spirals. He didn't have the look of a killer anymore. Just a thing begging not to be finished. You laughed, she said. When your brother held me down, you smiled like you'd done it before. He choked on his breath. Please. Did she say please, too? His lips quivered. I didn't touch you, I didn't. He made me. Naomi's voice cut through him. Tell me her name. He blinked. The girl in the wagon you burned. You saw the ring. Tell me her name. I don't. She shot him in the chest. He bucked once. Then sagged. Eli made his way down slow. The creek wet his boots. She was still standing there, the gun lowered now, her shoulders rising with each breath like the whole world had been sitting on them. You knew her? He asked. Naomi nodded once. She was 12. I sewed the hem of her first dress. She liked birds. Said the ravens didn't scare her because they looked like they had secrets. Eli crouched by the body, checked the pulse out of habit. There was none. He looked up at Naomi. She was your sister. Naomi didn't answer. Her silence was enough. They burned the body, not out of mercy, just so nothing would come back for it. They watched in silence while the smoke curled toward the open sky. Eli didn't offer comfort. Naomi didn't ask. They buried the ring in a patch of soft soil near the base of a stone cedar. Naomi marked it with 3 small rocks, stacked one on another. She didn't cry. When they mounted again, the sun was going down. They didn't head back to the cabin. Not yet. There was something else unfinished. They rode south, back toward Calico Ridge, where Poston's body still waited in that shallow grave. It was Naomi who said it first. He was kind. Eli nodded. Didn't talk much, but he never looked at me like the others did. He let me rest behind the counter when I was passing through, said I could pay him with stories. You did. Made up a few. They buried Poston under the old juniper, out back. Naomi insisted on placing the stone herself. Eli helped lift the weight. When it was done, they stood in silence again. Someone ought to know, she said, about what happened. They will, Eli said. But not from a marshal. No. From us. She looked at him. For a moment her face cracked with something close to disbelief. You'll stay. Eli looked past her, toward the open hills, the ridgelines sharp against a bruised sky. I think I'm done running from ghosts. Naomi didn't smile, but something in her shoulders shifted. They spent the night in the shop, boarded the doors and cleaned what could be cleaned. Naomi lit the stove. Eli patched the broken stair rail. Neither of them spoke much. The next day they started again. Naomi wrote Poston's name in the ledger neat and square, then added another name below it, the girl. Underneath, she wrote one word, witness. Eli found her that afternoon standing behind the counter. The revolver lay beside her, cleaned and loaded. You planning on staying? He asked. I'm planning on keeping the door open, she said. For who? Women, girls. People who need somewhere to go when the roads run out. He studied her a long moment. You're going to need more than one gun. Naomi nodded. That's why you're still here. He didn't argue. They began boarding up the upstairs, turning it into a place someone might sleep safe. Naomi cleaned the back room. Eli fixed the shelves. They lit lanterns at night so the place looked lived in. One by one, people began to pass through again. A trapper missing half his hand, a woman with a child and no name. Naomi didn't ask where they came from, just gave them water and food, and sometimes the gun if they needed it. She kept the shop running. Eli kept the rifles loaded. Some nights she still woke screaming. He didn't go to her, just waited until she came back to herself. Then they sat outside, and the sky overhead turned with the quiet of old stars. There was no peace, not yet. But there was no more silence, either. The wind changed in early spring. It came out of the north, cold and bitter even in daylight, carrying with it the taste of snow from peaks that never thawed and something else beneath it, a kind of unrest. Outlaws drifted south, pushed by marshals or bounty men or just the weight of their own sins. And word spread about the shop at Calico Ridge, not just for its tools and dried beans, but for the woman who ran it and the man who watched the road. They didn't ask for trouble, but they never turned it away. Eli kept track of faces, one-eyed drovers, scarred boys looking for a name, drifters with nothing to trade but stories. He listened always, because sometimes a name would slip out. Or a detail, and Naomi would stop sweeping and her hands would go still. It had been 6 months since the day she pulled the trigger in the creek. The shop had changed. The walls were brighter, the floors swept. There was a bell above the door that rang clear each time someone entered. But the back room still held the old shotgun, and behind the stove, Eli had mounted a length of chain where he sharpened his knives. The lock on the gear room door had been replaced by Naomi, reinforced iron, stronger than it needed to be. No one went in there now unless she said so. That morning, a rider came in wearing a marshal's badge. His coat was too clean and his mustache too neat for these parts, but his eyes were sharp, and the revolver on his hip was worn silver from draw after draw. Naomi saw him first. He stepped through the door like he owned the dust on the floorboards. "Ma'am," he said. Naomi nodded. "Coffee's hot. Biscuit if you want it." He touched the brim of his hat. "Appreciate it." Eli appeared from the back. The marshal's gaze ticked to him. Then down to the shotgun on the wall. "You cut her." Eli didn't answer. The marshal smiled like a man used to waiting. "I've been riding circuit through Vermilion Ridge. Found a body out near Widow's Spine. Burned bad, real bad." But what teeth he had matched a wanted man by the name of Jacob Ferrin. You ever hear that name? Eli's silence held like rock. Naomi moved to pour the coffee. The marshal kept going. He and his brother Abel were wanted for the assault and murder of 4 women in Red Valley, and a merchant by the name of Poston. Eli didn't blink. "That's so." The marshal sipped the coffee, winced, strong. Naomi said nothing. "You see them pass through?" the marshal asked, looking at each of them in turn. Naomi stared back. Her voice didn't waver. "We've had a lot of riders, not all left names." The marshal smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, just wanted to be sure. We found tracks leading this way and figured someone must have seen something." "Maybe," Eli said, "but a man running don't always stop to talk." "That's the truth," the marshal said. He left 10 minutes later. Naomi watched him ride off through the dust. Eli stood beside her. "He knows," she said. "He suspects." "That's enough." Eli adjusted the bandolier he hadn't worn in weeks. "Then we make ready." And so they did. That night, Naomi pulled the ledger from under the counter. She added 3 more names: Abel Ferrin, Jacob Ferrin, and a girl called Elsie, whose name had never been spoken in the shop until that night. Then she lit a candle and began to write something else. A record, not for law, not for justice, for memory. She didn't stop until the candle burned to nothing. The next morning, they set out traps along the northern ridge. Eli placed warning bells in the rock hollows. Naomi packed supplies under the floorboards, wrapped in oilcloth. She sharpened every blade, every nail. She swept the shop twice. She made bread and left it out to cool. It was 3 days before the marshal returned. But this time he didn't come alone. 4 men rode with him, not deputies, gunmen. You could tell by the way they carried themselves. Hired men. They stopped outside the shop like they were staking a claim. Naomi stepped out first, no gun in hand, just flour on her sleeves and calm in her eyes. The marshal dismounted. "We've been thinking," he said. "Maybe you too know more than you said." Naomi didn't move. "Maybe you're the reason they disappeared." Eli appeared beside her, no shotgun in sight, but the way he stood made one unnecessary. "You got a warrant?" he asked. The marshal laughed once. "No, sir, I got suspicion. That's a start." One of the gunmen stepped forward. "Back room," the marshal said. "Check it." Eli didn't speak. Naomi lifted her hand. "Only bodies in there are ones we buried," she said. "That's so." "Go ahead. But you'd best step careful. The floor bites." They stepped in anyway. The shop door closed behind them. Naomi moved to the corner where the old crate still sat. She lifted the lid. The sound that followed was metal sliding into place. Eli waited by the counter. Minutes passed. Then a curse, sharp and panicked, echoed from the back. Gunshots followed, muffled, then silence. One man stumbled out, bleeding from the gut, fell face first onto the floorboards. The marshal turned. "You booby-trapped the damn room." Naomi didn't flinch. "You shouldn't send dogs where men ought to go." The last two gunmen drew. Eli stepped forward and fired, one shot for each. Quick, clean, smoke drifted in the still air. The marshal went for his gun. Naomi already had hers up. "Don't," she said. He froze. "They were murderers," she said. "They confessed, with their hands, with their knives. I just made sure they didn't do it again." They were still men under the law. "And what are you under? You came here with killers, not orders." He said nothing. Eli stepped closer. "Ride back. Tell them the Farron boys disappeared into the canyon. Tell them you lost the trail." The marshal stared, then nodded. He walked out slow, climbed into the saddle. His face had changed, less sure, less smug. Before he left, he turned one last time. "You'll make enemies." Naomi's voice was flat. "We already did." He rode off. They buried the bodies deep, away from the juniper and the ring, away from Poston's grave. When the sun set that night, Eli sat sharpening his blade again. Naomi didn't sleep. Neither of them did. Some debts don't rest easy. The next storm came not on hooves, but on whispers. Days passed, then weeks, and the marshal's warning proved true. Trouble didn't ride straight at them, it seeped. Travelers who once stopped for bread and kerosene now passed wide. Naomi noticed it first. Fewer footsteps in the dust. Fewer coins dropped on the counter. Then came the man with the crooked hat, who asked too many questions without asking any at all. He rode off without buying a thing. Eli watched the horizon tighter after that. Naomi changed the locks again. Reinforced the cellar hatch. They didn't speak of fear, but they moved like people who'd touched it. The land around them stayed quiet, but the quiet held weight. The shop became a kind of outpost, half sanctuary, half ambush. They kept the windows clean, the rifles oiled, their words few. Then one night a woman knocked at the back door. It was after dark. The front had been bolted. Naomi was drying the last plate. Eli had just stoked the fire. They froze at the sound. The knock came again, 3 times, slow. Naomi opened it. The woman on the stoop had blood down her sleeve and dirt in her teeth. Her eyes were wide and black in the lantern glow. "They're coming," she said, 1 dozen or more. "They mean to burn it." Eli stepped past Naomi, pulled her inside. "Who?" he asked. "Don't know their name," she said. "But I seen the mark, circle with an eye inside. They've been clearing places like yours." Said it's judgment time. She collapsed then, knees buckling. Naomi caught her. They laid her near the fire, gave her water. Her name was June. She was from a ridge town farther north, nothing left now but smoke and bone. "They call themselves watchmen," she whispered, "but they're just men who take what they want and kill what won't kneel." Naomi sat beside her, silent. Eli paced. You sure they're coming here? June nodded, heard 'em talking. Said the woman at Calico Ridge put down 2 of their kind. They mean to settle it. Sundown tomorrow. That night they didn't sleep. Naomi climbed the ladder to the roof and pulled the old signal mirror from the beam where Poston used to hang deer. She used it to flash once westward, a sign, not for help, there was no help, but for witness. Eli didn't ask what it meant. He nailed the doors shut, reinforced the windows with bar iron. He laid traps along the dry creek and soaked the front porch planks with oil. Naomi opened the gear room and pulled out a bundle she hadn't touched since the day she'd been found. Inside was a shotgun sawed short, her blood still faint in the grain of the stock. She took it. June woke near dawn. Her fever was high. You'll die here, she murmured. They don't stop. Naomi wiped her face with a wet cloth. Then we don't stop either. The sun crept over the ridge like a knife rising slow. Heat came fast behind it, thick and still. They waited inside. Eli by the east window, Naomi at the back with the sawed-off. June lay wrapped in blankets in the cellar, breathing like a bird drowning. They heard the horses before they saw them. 12, just like June said. Faces covered in dust scarves, guns slung low. One of them carried a flag. A crude circle with an eye in the middle. The watchmen, they didn't speak, just rode up and spread out. Then the leader dismounted. He was tall, with skin burnt dark from long rides and eyes like polished stone. His voice was plain. We want the woman, he called. Give her to us and the rest live. No one answered. He waited a beat. I know what she did, he said. I know she burned Jacob and gutted Abel. You think that settles the account? Naomi stepped to the door. You knew them. He smiled. We raised them, trained them. They were our brothers. You trained them to rape and murder. His smile widened. We trained them to take what they needed and not ask the world's permission. Naomi lifted the shotgun. You picked the wrong grave to piss on. He laughed once, then all 12 drew. The first volley hit the front wall, wood splintered, glass shattered. Eli didn't move. He waited for the second wave when the men dismounted to rush. That's when he fired. The shotgun bucked once. A man went down. Naomi waited until they circled the side. She fired through the rear slats. One man screamed and fell. Another kept coming. The porch went up in flame. Eli had tossed the lantern as they breached. 2 more fell to the fire. The watchmen didn't stop, but they slowed. One crawled beneath the window. Naomi saw the shadow and dropped a clay jar from above. It shattered. Gunpowder and nails. The blast took half his face. Blood ran in the dust. They kept coming. By nightfall, 5 lay dead. One limped off into the canyon, arm trailing like rope. The leader still stood, untouched, watching the house like a man considering flood against stone. You don't win, he said. You just last longer. Naomi stood in the doorway. That's enough. He raised his pistol. June appeared behind him. She crawled through the dirt, knife clutched in both hands. When she rose, she didn't scream. Just drove the blade into the back of his neck and twisted. He dropped to his knees. Naomi shot him in the head. Silence followed. June collapsed. Naomi carried her inside. Eli sat beside the last broken window. Smoke rose around him. The land was dark again, the shop half ruined. They didn't speak that night, but the doors stayed open, and the wind carried their names west. By spring, the bodies were bones. The blood was gone from the floorboards, but the memory of it stayed in the nails. A char mark curled along the porch rail where the fire had caught, and the front windows were patched with scrap tin and the backs of old wanted posters. No one asked what had happened at Calico Ridge, not aloud, but every rider who passed through knew. They smelled it in the ash. They felt it in the silence between Eli and Naomi, and in the gaze of the woman who now kept the ledger beside a loaded shotgun. Naomi no longer asked where people came from. She asked where they were going, and if they didn't have an answer, she fed them anyway. Some stayed for a night, some for a week. A few stayed longer. One of them, a boy with a wound across his chest and no words left in him, took to sleeping under the work table in the gear room. He never flinched when the hammer struck nail, never cried. Naomi gave him a new name, Ash, and he took it like breath. Eli rebuilt the stables in silence. He no longer rode out unless Naomi asked it. His strength turned inward, his watch never easing. At night he would clean and oil the same rifle 3 times over, as though each round might be needed. But the hills stayed quiet. For a while, one morning a letter came, left under a rock by the creek, sealed in pitch. Naomi read it twice, then burned it in the stove. When Eli asked who it was from, she just said, "Someone who remembers." He didn't press, but that night she gathered her things. Not many, her revolver, the ledger, a strip of ash wood carved into a blade's shape. "You're leaving," Eli said. Not a question, she nodded. "Why?" "They're gathering again, not here, not yet, but somewhere worse. I feel it in my teeth. You don't owe them anything. I owe myself, and the ones still locked in rooms no one's opened yet." Eli watched her. The woman he'd found bloodied and bound now stood taller than the doorframe. Not just because of her spine, but because of what she carried. He said nothing, just handed her a tin box. Inside were 6 shells, all hand-packed, one marked with a red notch. "The last one's for Mercy," he said. She took it without thanks. "Thanks weren't their way. I'll send word," she said. "I'll be here." Naomi left before dawn, riding a pale horse they'd taken off one of the watchmen. She didn't look back. The canyon swallowed her. Eli stood watching until the dust faded. The shop stayed open. The gear room became a kitchen again. The cellar stayed dark. Ash, the boy, began to speak in broken words. June recovered, slow but sure, and started stitching canvas into new curtains. Every few weeks, a stranger arrived with the same tired look, the kind that said they'd come far and lost more than they dared say. Eli never asked. He just gave them water and taught them how to hold a gun. Naomi's first letter came with the wind 6 months later. A girl delivered it, barely 16, with dried blood under her nails and teeth filed to points. She'd come from a mining camp 3 ridges over. Said Naomi had found her in a pit and shot the man who kept her there. The letter was short. One of them ran. I followed. He won't run again. Eli burned the letter after reading it, then reloaded the rifle. He put another shell in the tin. More came after. Not letters, people, girls, women, sometimes boys, all marked. All carrying the same silence Naomi once had. They never said her name. Just spoke of a woman who rode like wind through scorched hills, who never stayed, who kept a ledger and carried knives carved from wood and bone. A myth, some said, a reckoning, said others, but Eli knew the truth. Naomi wasn't out for justice, not anymore. She was shaping the world into something that could never do what had been done to her. And he was building the place they'd return to when it was done. Years passed. The shop grew quiet again, not for lack of people, but because peace had a different sound. Eli grew slower. His hands stiffened in the cold, but he waited. Every day, every dusk. Then one night, as the wind rose through the canyon and the coyotes held off their usual cry, a rider came from the east. She wore a black duster torn at the hem, and her hair was streaked with silver. Her hands were scarred, her eyes steady. She didn't knock. Eli opened the door before she reached it. Naomi stepped inside. Neither of them said anything. She pulled a bundle from her saddlebag, laid it on the table. Inside was a book, leather-wrapped, stained dark in places, her ledger. She filled it. Eli stared at the last page. One name, underlined twice. No details, just a final word written in Naomi's hand. Enough. She poured herself coffee. Sat across from him, the fire crackled. Ash, now taller, came from the back, saw her and froze. Naomi smiled at him, just a flicker. "Keep the door open," she said. Ash nodded once, then bolted it shut. Outside, the wind died. Inside, the silence was full. Not empty, not anymore.